Hey there, thanks for joining me on this episode of Tropical Weather Impact. I'm meteorologist Peyton Malone. We got a lot to talk about on this upcoming episode, including what's left of Gabrielle, still a Category 3 storm impacting, hurricane warnings in effect for some islands. We'll detail that, and all eyes on Invest 94 and Invest 93. They both have a high chance of development here in the coming days, and there's a lot of uncertainty and a lot of interesting things we're going to be watching with these two. We're going to be talking about that mess in a second. But first, I wanted to start with Gabrielle because just a near-term thing, not impacting the United States, but the Azores Islands out here are going to be getting ready for impacts from this Category 1 storm by that point. By Thursday night into Friday, there are actually hurricane warnings in effect. And then the remnants of Gabrielle are going to be spinning on down what's left of it towards Portugal here in Spain. And so that's by Sunday into Monday. Some really interesting stuff there when you're talking about a remnant hurricane moving off towards Europe. All right, let's dive into this mess. And let's just start by saying there remains more than usual uncertainty in the forecast, and that's to put it lightly. Now, I don't have any Gulf problems right now. We'll start with the great news there for us in New Orleans. But if I'm on the East Coast from Florida all the way up the East Coast to the Carolinas, especially the Bahamas, I'm going to be watching these features very, very closely. Now, you're going to hear meteorologists say we're given the clear for X, Y, and Z if you're somewhere here to there. I would caution really locking into any forecast right now simply because we've got two systems trying to form. That complicates the forecast exponentially. It's not just one little single system and we're tracking it. You're tracking two developing systems, and they do impact each other. They impact the steering currents, they impact the intensity and all these things. And so it's really too soon to say for sure exactly what's going to happen here, but we're going to talk about some scenarios. Now, what I noticed this morning right off the bat is Invest 94, which is sitting generally around the Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico. It's not very organized this morning, but it is a little bit further south than what we were expecting yesterday. Now, Invest 93 is interesting because I think this is a depression or a tropical storm. So depending on when you watch this video on this Wednesday, it could already be a tropical storm or a depression by the time you see this video. So either way, I don't think the thinking is going to change a whole lot. So that little line there, that's the old path of Gabrielle. That's Invest 93 on the cusp of being a depression or our next tropical storm. Next name, by the way, is Umberto, and I do think that's going to get a cone at some point today. By the way, it's Wednesday, September the 24th. Now, what the East Coast is watching from the Bahamas up through Florida and especially the Carolinas is Invest 94. This is the one that has the potential to actually impact land in the near-term forecast. And so it's not going to be moving very quickly. Neither one of them are moving fast. But what's Invest 94 going to do is may try to become a depression or a storm somewhere in here. There's the Turks and Caicos, there's the Bahamas, there's Miami. So maybe a storm somewhere in here by Friday, Saturday, or Sunday. Don't see it being a big problem for Florida through the weekend here at all, but you may have a storm off sea here and off towards the Bahamas and lifting to the north. At the same time, you could very well have a named storm or even a hurricane out here in this area traveling along in parallel to it. They're so close together that they are likely going to impact each other. This oftentimes is, well, it's quite rare. You maybe have heard it talked about a couple times in the Atlantic basin. But whenever two low pressures get close enough to interact with each other, we call it the Fujiwara effect. And there's a lot of different things that can happen with the Fujiwara effect. The biggest thing is they can, well, cause a lot of extreme motions and difference in paths, and also there's a lot of uncertainty because of the Fujiwara effect. You get the interaction of these two low pressures and it makes the forecast extremely complicated. So that's kind of a debrief on what we're watching here. Let's talk about some of our tropical models and timing. Again, if we are looking at a named storm out here with Invest 93, through this weekend, it's still out in the Atlantic basin. It's not a threat out here. Now, meanwhile, Invest 94 is trying to ramp up, and we could have a depression or a named storm trying to form somewhere near the Bahamas. Notice a lot of the models agree something's trying to form right in here by this weekend. As we go further out in time, you can see there that they maybe are getting closer and closer, and that's when all that interaction begins, and that's when the forecast gets even more complicated. Now, if I'm on the East Coast, especially South Carolina and North Carolina, I'm watching this a bit closer because if there's going to be a landfalling named storm or a storm in the Atlantic heading your way, it could be as early as the end of this weekend and into early next week. Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. Again, it really just depends on how much this one can strengthen and what impact this feature has on the existing one over here. Very, very complicated. You can see that when you look at our models. And I caution you, if you are a model watcher, your model runs are going to look extremely different probably each time. Now, they're likely going to look fairly similar in the near term because our two features really aren't interacting yet. But as you get further out in time, you introduce more error into the forecast, and we start to watch for that Fujiwara effect. Now, as we go out in time, notice our models are showing similar scenarios through Friday and Saturday. Here's our developing storm out in the Atlantic. Here's Invest 94, trying to consolidate as it rides near the islands. This is towards Friday and Saturday. Now, the European model has been a bit more aggressive with there being two named storms at the same time. The GFS has been less aggressive, but it is certainly possible that we have, let's say, Umberto here and Emilde here, and they're both moving at the same rate towards the northeast. Now, as they get closer and closer, those low pressures have to interact with each other. Now, what happens in this case, you don't necessarily get the storms coming together and creating a massive superstorm like what you would see in a movie. It's a bit different than that. Oftentimes what happens is the stronger storm can take over the weaker storm. The weaker storm will actually pivot around the rotation of the other storm and get absorbed into it. Now, this can make the wind field larger for the storm, but it doesn't necessarily mean it bombs out and turns into a Category 5 hurricane. Not looking at that, but it can make the wind field larger. And there are some model runs that do show this and them combining and becoming a larger system. Now, there's also some model runs. Now, notice what happens here. Let's focus on the green. This is the European model. It has two separate entities, one off the East Coast on Tuesday and this one further out, and it has them basically separating. The GFS model does something a bit different. The GFS model does that Fujiwara effect. So notice, as we go into Monday, you've got maybe a named storm here, a weaker system here. The GFS model is showing that Fujiwara effect essentially where, look what happens. That weaker system gets tugged up into the circulation, you get a bigger wind field in the GFS model, and it absorbs it. And so these two model solutions, the GFS and Euro, are vastly different, and the outcome and the impacts maybe to parts of the East Coast, which is why I'm really messaging we don't know which one of these is more correct at this point. Typically, you do see the GFS play out with these systems, Fujiwara effects, but it's just such a complicated meteorological thing that I caution you locking in on any of these systems. Now, once again, the European model, which is what you're seeing here, shows this storm out in the Atlantic ramping up fast. It's becoming a hurricane, and this feature, Invest 94, taking its time, but developing into maybe a depression or a storm by this weekend. You can see there as we go out in time, Sunday and Monday, this would just be crazy to see right off the East Coast. Maybe a named storm off the East Coast, and then further out, a hurricane. Again, the interaction is going to happen. It's just what exactly happens is the question that we really have, and the big question. And it all comes down to steering currents, timing, and all of these things. And so you may be saying, well, so what's the forecast? We really don't know. We don't know the final evolution of these two features, if they're going to interact, how much they're actually going to organize. Sometimes models will overdo the organization. Let's say this storm just struggles to form at all and you just have a hurricane out here. That would be best case scenario because maybe we could keep it out to sea and not have anything too organized moving towards the U.S. So let's talk about the steering currents. And while this is also complicated, there really are a lot of moving parts in this forecast, not just the fact that two systems are going to be close together, but what's happening in the upper levels to steer all of these things. So in the near term, we've got a ridge of high pressure that's extended all the way to the East Coast. That's why our two systems are moving more west-northwest right now. They're riding under the ridge. This right here is a trough of low pressure. That is digging down over the eastern U.S. Now, as we go out in time, I want you to watch this trough of low pressure right here. I'll watch what happens to it. As we get into Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, part of it gets cut off. And so the stronger jet stream winds lift away, but that little feature right there is a cutoff low. It's also a nightmare to forecast. So you're truly looking at one of the most convoluted, hard steering current forecasts you can get in the tropics. You've got two systems next to each other. You've got an upper level low nearby too. Why are upper level lows a nightmare? Well, this one's cut off. They meander. it's really hard to forecast a meandering upper level low. We call them weatherman lows for a reason, is because they really do make your hair pull your hair out. So this upper level low is going to be sitting somewhere off the east coast. The further west this upper level low, if it sits up over here, it actually can help tug the system towards the U.S. If the upper level low is a bit further west, well, then maybe we can keep it out to sea, curving around the edge of the high pressure. And so you've got four main parts of this map you're seeing here. You've got your ridge, you've got your upper level low, and you may have two tropical systems. All four of those, the timing, the placement is all crucial on how close a system can actually get to the United States. Now, that's just one factor in forecasting the tropics. The other is the intensity. One thing I will say, if we go out in motion, you can see here that you've got your two distinct features here. Look at this giant dry air mass in the Gulf and on the eastern coast, eastern U.S. here. We want some of this dry air to get tugged towards that direction. And so there's some question on, does this dry air limit the intensification of this tropical wave once it gets closer to the East Coast? Hard to say, but you can see there maybe it does get some of that dry air entrained up in it from this continental air mass. One of those minor features that could cause some big changes in the forecast, but that's what we're watching. But there you have it. That would be just unbelievable it actually played out this way. This has been one of the more dramatic models we've seen. Two storms doing the tango out in the Atlantic right off the East Coast. What a headache. We're going to keep you updated here on Tropical Weather Impact. There are plenty more updates to come. If I'm on the East Coast, I'm not stressing about this, but I am tuning in daily to see what's going on with this messy forecast. We will have those updates for you right here on WWL Plus and on YouTube. I'll see you right back here tomorrow with the latest. Thanks for joining me.